taking time for your health. The African American Wellness Watch. Trusted information for us, by us. Dr. Mike LeNoir and other experts from around the country and around the world have the latest on how you and your family can get healthy and stay well. It's time for the African American Wellness Watch. Welcome to the Wellness Watch. I'm your moderator, George Strait. Okay, a quick question. What is the deadliest, most neglected, and most widespread pandemic of our time? COVID? No. HIV? No. But I'll give you a hint. It's called the silent killer. In fact, worldwide, it kills more than 10 million people every year. And a third of those deaths occur in adults under the age of 70. The answer is hypertension, high blood pressure. What is it? Why is it so deadly? How can we prevent it? And if we have it, what the heck can you do about it? Those are the questions that we will answer in this edition of the Wellness Watch. We have the absolute perfect people to help us work through this. The first is Carmen Ward-Sullivan. She's a nurse and program director of the nursing program at Samuel Merritt College and an expert on dealing with hypertension. And of course, we have our host, an expert on his own, Dr. Michael LeNoir. I guess the first question to both of you guys is, what is hypertension and why is it so bad?
Hypertension is, simply put, or high blood pressure, too much pressure or force within the vessels in our body. And the pressure of that pressing against the blood vessels in our body, what causes our blood pressure to rise.
So that's certainly a good definition, but most people define it, Dr. Ward-Sullivan, by the numbers. So how do you define hypertension by its numbers?
Well, currently the research suggests that any blood pressure 120/80 or lower is normal, and a blood pressure above 120/80 is considered high. Years ago, when I first entered nursing back in the mid-'80s, the blood pressure of 140/80 or 90 was acceptable. But now with the research, we know that chronic exposure to having your blood pressure above 120/80 and over time impacts our organs and can cause kidney failure.
And why is hypertension called the silent killer?
We often hear that all the times and we wonder, why is it a silent killer? So if we think about hypertension, we often don't know what's happening in our body. So we are not experiencing some of the symptoms that someone might feel later on because of long-term exposure to hypertension. So we don't know the symptoms. And so that's one simple way to say this is why it's a silent killer.
And, hypertension is a gradation of problems. Some people have a little bit, some people have moderate amount, some people have a lot. What are the treatments and how you decide upon what to do once you diagnose someone with hypertension?
Well, an easy thing to consider doing is to definitely think about weight loss, stress reduction before you go into the medical management of hypertension. So if you can eat a healthy diet first, reduce your stress, taking that nap, the sacred nap, that helps, right? And eating a proper diet. Those will be great approaches to implement before having to take medications. And if you have to go on medications, then June, you might see one person that's prescribed a diuretic or a water pill that you may hear about. So they'll take the water pill and maybe that's all that person needs. And then there are others, of course, that may need that water pill or diuretic and another medication to lower their blood pressure. And so there are many medications that are available that can be used to treat blood pressure. Depends on your provider.
Anytime you have to take a regular medicine all the time, adherence is a problem. We used to call it something else, but now adherence is the term that challenges us for people to continue to take the medicine. One of the criticisms is that sometimes these medicines make you feel worse.
Absolutely. I really talk with patients and they'll say that if you take the medication at the same time every day, for example, that will help. But if we take it a step further and say, perhaps taking the medications at bedtime might work out better for your lifestyle. So if the medications make you sleepy, then take the medication at bedtime. I wouldn't suggest taking the diuretic or water pill at bedtime, because then you'll be up all night and you'll lose sleep. So that's not the best strategy. But taking the diuretic in the morning might be a better approach. And then taking the blood pressure medication, like lisinopril, for example, at bedtime, if you find that you're sleepy with some of those side effects.
But aren't there some specific side effects that affect men that cause especially an awful lot of men who have hypertension to say, it's not worth it?
Yes, absolutely. We think about, for men such as beta blockers, it does cause impotence for a lot of African American men, or I should just say men in general. And so then there's a tendency to not want to take that medication, not tell their spouse, and then they go on for a number of years with this high blood pressure that's not getting better. And then, of course, the end result is potentially kidney disease. And so that's something to definitely talk with your provider about, to try other medication regimens that might help lower your blood pressure.
Yeah, I'd like to share a quick anecdote with you. I never really had blood hypertension. Let's start with that. But every time I went to see the doctor, my systolic pressures went up, and subsequent to that, probably went back to normal. So for several years, I was on a drug to treat hypertension. Every day during the middle of the day, I would get sleepy. Really sleepy. Sometimes falling asleep at the desk. And then one episode, I was driving and actually passed out. And I found out that I was never hypertensive, that I was always hypotensive. And I was hypotensive every day. So that's what was making me sleepy. And that's what caused me to pass out. And when I was reevaluated, I never really had hypertension. And so consequently, I was not cognizant, even as a doctor, of the impact of the drug, because I never thought about that as a side effect. And so consequently, I think you do have to be concerned about some of these side effects. There's so many good drugs for hypertension. You can usually find one that you can take without consequence.
Oh,
And also these drugs are relatively inexpensive, especially like the water pills and those kinds of things. They're past their patent date and they're virtually free.
Yes, absolutely. So there's no reason to not take the medication. But you bring up a good point, Dr. LeNoir. It may be that one person has gone to their provider and they were diagnosed with hypertension and taking the medications, but yet maybe it was a time period that person was just very stressed or something was happening. And so maybe the following year or so, the person lost weight, they're eating well, maybe they don't need to be on that medication any longer. So that's something to bring up, that I would recommend patients bringing up with their providers, just to make sure, is this medication still really needed? Can I wean off of this medication?
Now, there are other ways, though, to manage hypertension beside the drugs.
Yes.
What are some of those, especially stress, diet, smoking, some of those techniques that you can use to reduce your blood pressure without the intervention of medication?
Yes, I like to stick with just making sure that we put in the forefront exercise. If we talked earlier about 150 minutes per week. And so if you divide that up to 20 minutes, 7 days a week, or 30 minutes, 5 days a week, 15 minutes out and 15 minutes back, or taking 10 minutes here and there throughout the day to reach that 30 minutes of exercise. And the diet, of course. And as I mentioned, if you smoke, don't smoke, stop. If you have to wean yourself off over time, do that so you can get to the point where you are not smoking. That does not bode well for your body. And focus on stress reduction. That is key. I've mentioned earlier that I joined this group, Sacred Naps, with Dr. Marcus Penn and Carmen Penn. And it was such a relaxing and rejuvenating experience that I never thought about it. We're so busy day to day. I didn't think about pausing just to take a sacred nap. It does wonders for your body, the mindfulness, eating correctly, changing your diet if you can, go to Mediterranean or plant-based, and exercise. And as I mentioned, those are key modalities that one could use. I visited Egypt and Ghana not too long ago, and there's this hibiscus tea, which is a deep red tea. It tastes different than what we find here in the States. And I read up on that hibiscus tea because it's a very common drink with the locals in Africa. And it does have effects of lowering your blood pressure. So I was amazed at that. Something as simple as having tea, a hibiscus tea in the afternoon can lower your blood pressure, and I'm sure the effect is over time.
The other thing I think is that whether you have hypertension or not, there are certain things that people should have at home. One of those is a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff. Would you agree with that?
Agree 100%. 100%. But I would say for the blood pressure kit, not to use the one that's on the wrist. Go ahead and find the blood pressure kits that you put around the bicep of your arm.
Yeah, so I think that's important, especially if you have hypertension, because it can go up and down, depending on a lot of dynamics. In my case, if I had been taking my blood pressure at home, I would have eliminated the medication long before that. But that's why I have programs like this.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that you're talking about, stress and where stress comes from, I think that there's been some research about the fact that African Americans have a special stress that's brought on by racism. So the degree to which we can recognize that and deal with that could actually affect hypertension, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You know, when we think about the effects of racism over time as well, I always use over time because it's these incidences that affect us over time that build up. Our stress level builds up. We have the stress hormone, cortisol, that causes, us to develop belly fat, for example. And then we know belly fat can lead to a number of different conditions and stress in our body and cholesterol. So when we think about racism, that exposure to racism and stress over time can impact every organ in our body. And it's hard to find ways. We think about structural racism, what we can do to eliminate that. It's the constant exposure and explaining what structural racism is and what racism is and does to our body. There's a lot of research and literature out there that talks about the impact of racism on African Americans. And so it would be beneficial for us to make sure that we keep this in the forefront, talk to our legislators. What can we do as we talk to others to help us understand the impact of racism that's impacting African Americans?
Yeah, my brother's an author, and he says racism makes him tired and crazy too. So I do think that there's an increasing body of literature that suggests the impact of 400 years of the slave health deficit and the impact of racism on every chronic condition.
The focal point indeed. Remember, you can go to our website at aawellnessproject.org and get even more information on hypertension. For now, I want to thank Dr. LeNoir for leading such an important and lively discussion on hypertension, sometimes known as high blood pressure.
So I want to thank you, Doctor, for joining us. And I want to thank those of you who are watching us and who watch our programs, The Wellness Watch, on a regular basis. And always are, as we say, health is your biggest asset, so protect it.